I'm still in shock that he's gone. Even though it's been 2 weeks since my husband Daniel's death, I still feel as though he could come in the front door at any time to moan about traffic, ask what's for supper, or give me the kind but worn-out smile that brightened my days. However, he is not returning. The love of my life vanished in an instant. His sister, Vanessa, determined that my husband's funeral was the ideal occasion to cause a stir when I was still in the depths of my grief. Yes, you read correctly, in the midst of the service. My hands were gripped so tightly that my nails were making crescents in my palms as I sat in the front row. Family members, acquaintances, Daniel's business associates, and staff members from the company he founded were crammed into the room. Everyone was in black, sniffling, mumbling, and in sadness, Vanessa excluded, with her arms crossed and a stony expression on her face, as though the entire situation were a hassle. She sat a few rows back. She looked about the room as if she was extremely bored. I ought to have anticipated something. However, I was too worn out, too devastated to prepare myself. Then, just as the last eulogy was coming to an end and everyone was getting ready to head to the grave, Vanessa got up and cleared her throat aloud. I felt sick to my stomach. She declared, "I have something to say." Sharp and demanding, her voice pierced the atmosphere. Everybody looked in her direction. Daniel's staff knew how she was, and I could immediately see the uneasy expressions on their faces. All of us did. However, I never thought she would do this, not even in my darkest fears. Vanessa narrowed her eyes and squeezed her lips into a thin line as she stared at me. She declared, "I am more deserving of his business than you are." My breath caught at the entitlement in her voice. "I refuse to let my brother's hard work go to waste, and you have no idea how to run it." The crowd echoed with gasps. A whisper went up, "Is she serious?" "Unbelievable," said another voice, murmured by Ethan, Daniel's best friend. My hands trembled, not only from sadness, but also from the outrageousness of what she said. She was already circling like a vulture, ready to take advantage of Daniel's companionship, and his casket was just there. I got to my feet slowly and wiped the tears from my eyes. Despite my racing heart, I made myself look into her eyes. "That's funny because I have a surprise for you," I added, taking a big breath. Vanessa's eyes became even more narrow. "What are you discussing?" I didn't respond. Rather, I looked at Mr. Caldwell, the attorney who had assisted Daniel in writing his will when he fell ill. His briefcase was lying next to him as he sat a few rows back. We looked at each other and he nodded slightly before getting to his feet. He took a big envelope out of his briefcase and adjusted his glasses. "This is Daniel's last will and testament," he stated in a composed yet strong voice. "You might want to take a seat, Vanessa." The color faded from Vanessa's face. As Mr. Caldwell opened the envelope and started reading, silence descended on the room. "This is Daniel Harrison's last will and testament, as he is of sound mind and body." As the words set in, I continued to look at Vanessa. Her knuckles became white as her fingers tightened their hold on the pew's edge. She believed she had everything worked out and that she could simply go in, take Daniel's legacy, and leave the business. However, she was unaware of Daniel's actions. "I give my home, our joint assets, and complete ownership of Harrison and Company to my dear wife. She has been my partner in every way, and I have faith in her to sustain the principles on which I founded this company." Complete ownership was right there. A couple of them whispered to each other. While some of Daniel's longtime staff sat stunned, others nodded as though they had anticipated this result. However, everyone was anticipating the impending blast. And it did. As though she had been scorched, Vanessa sprang from her chair. "What?" A few individuals recoiled at the sound of her disbelieving voice cracking. Mr. Caldwell went on reading unfazed. "In addition, I have given my sister Vanessa Harrison plenty over my lifetime, so I leave her nothing. She has made it apparent that she does not respect my decisions, and I have faith in my wife to act in the best interests of the business going ahead." If the words had hit her in the body, Vanessa stumbled backward one step. "No, that isn't accurate." She screamed and sprang forward as if she were going to rip the will out of Mr. Caldwell's hands. That is untrue. I wouldn't be subjected to it by Daniel. People let out a gasp. Oh God, someone whispered. With my heart still heavy with loss but now driven by something more powerful, I took a step closer. He did, in fact, I muttered. Vanessa's eyes were flaming with rage as she spun around to confront me. You succeeded. She made the accusation. You deceived him and forced him to change it. At my sides, my hands balled into fists. Have you hit him? Even though my voice was low, it now had a steely edge. Daniel understood exactly who you were, which is why he made this choice. You were just interested in what he could offer you. You never gave a damn about him. There was a mutter of agreement among the audience. Everyone nodded. The truth was known by everybody. As she looked around the room for encouragement, Vanessa's breath caught. But there was none. Not from the pals of Daniel. Not from the workers. Not from her own parents either. Her eyes were filled with pure hatred as she turned back to face me. She spat. You don't know what you're doing. You will run that company into the ground, and it will fail under. You. Despite the lump in my throat, I forced myself to breathe. I refused to back down, even though her remarks were more painful than I cared to acknowledge. We'll check on that. Desperate for anyone to stand at her side, Vanessa's gaze swept over the room one final time. However, nobody made a move. Nobody said anything. She nearly knocked down an elderly woman on her way out, her face contorted in anger as she pivoted on her heel. The echo echoed across the quiet room as the massive oak doors closed behind her. My knees felt like they were about to buckle, so I shakily exhaled. My best buddy Olivia came over and gave me a handshake. It's done, she muttered. However, I felt a sinking sensation in my stomach as I sank back into my seat, my hands still shaking in my lap. This was not the end of it. Not even close, because individuals like Vanessa don't give up easily. And I had a feeling she was just getting started. The house felt unnaturally vacant 2 weeks after the funeral. The worst part was the silence, no muffled laughter from Daniel's favorite crime podcasts. No hum of his late-night typing, no gentle footfall coming up the stairs after a long day at work. Simply quiet. I stood looking at the framed pictures on the bookcase in his office. The majority of them featured us wedding pictures, trips, and impromptu candids that caught our best moments. However, one picture caught my attention: Daniel and Vanessa as children, about 7 and 9 years old. Their eyes were gleaming with laughter, their faces caked with chocolate. Daniel showed me the photo for the first time, and I recalled it. He had muttered, "She wasn't always like this. She used to genuinely care about things other than money." However, that was a long-gone Vanessa. I was startled out of my reverie by a loud banging on the front door. It was 7:30 p.m. when I looked at the clock. It's too late for a quick stop. I rushed downstairs, my heart hammering against my ribs as my pulse increased. I recognized Ethan's face through the peephole. I felt a wave of relief. I pulled the door open after unlocking it. I said, "Hey, is everything all right?" Ethan rubbed the back of his neck as he entered. His typical laid-back smile was gone, and his dark hair was drenched from the outside drizzle. His voice was low as he said, "I needed to talk to you. It has to do with Vanessa." It was, of course. I closed the door behind me and pointed to the living room. With his hands gripped tightly together, Ethan fell into the couch. Sitting opposite him, I prepared myself. He remarked, "She's not letting this go. I heard her corner a board member in the break room today, trying to persuade him that you're not capable of managing the company." I tensed up. What did he say? Nothing, at least not in front of her. However, she is trying to turn people against you by sowing seeds. With my hands on the side of my knees, I let out a slow exhale. Vanessa's retaliation surprised me, but not this quickly. With a frown, Ethan continued, "There's more. She has been searching Daniel's financial documents for anything that she can use against you. I'm not sure how she gained access, but she is certain that there is a gap in the system that will allow her to legally sue the business." I felt my gut turn to knots. I said, "She can't do that," more to persuade myself than anyone else. Daniel's will was unchangeable. Mr. Caldwell saw to that. I understand, Ethan answered. Vanessa, however, is unconcerned. She is committed to demonstrating your incapacity to manage Harrison and Company, and if she is unable to do it legally, she will attempt to damage your reputation. I put a hand to my brow, resisting the panic that threatened to overwhelm me. Daniel's death had hardly given me time to mourn, and now I had to protect his legacy against his own sister. With more conviction this time, I declared, I won't let her win. I'm sure you won't, Ethan answered. However, you must exercise caution. Vanessa's erratic. She will stop at nothing to achieve her goals. The image of her outburst at the burial, the blatant anger in her eyes, when she saw Daniel had picked me over her, sent a chill down my spine. I whispered, she's already crossed so many lines. Why doesn't she cross more often? Ethan paused. He said cautiously, look, I don't want to scare you. However, she said something today. Something about how taking on more than one can lead to accidents. My blood froze. You mean she made threats against me? I asked, hardly raising my voice above a whisper. Ethan answered, you should watch your back, because Vanessa wants to see you fail, not just the business. She doesn't seem to care what it takes to make that happen, in my opinion. Suffocating silence descended between us. At last, Ethan got up and touched my shoulder. He remarked, you're stronger than she realizes. Remind yourself of that. I made an effort to grin. Thank you, Ethan. For everything. His face remained stiff as he nodded. If you need anything, give me a call. Additionally, secure your doors. Then he walked away. I checked the deadbolt again as soon as the door snapped shut behind him. And then I stood in the dark hallway, listening to the rain drumming against the windows. Ethan was correct. Vanessa would not give up until she achieved her goals. And I had a feeling. The worst had not yet arrived. 3 nights later, the first indication that something was amiss appeared. I had slept off on the couch, still holding a book, when I was startled awake by a slight sound. I sat up with my heart pounding and my ears strained to hear the silence. I initially believed I had a hallucination. Then again, there it was. Like a footstep on wood, there was a slight squeak. I looked at the time. 2:13 a.m. I swallowed hard, picked up my phone off the sofa table, and stood with all of my nerves jangled. The house was unnaturally silent as I listened for another sound. With caution, I made my way to the front hallway, my gaze darting to the alarm panel near the door. There were no alerts or breaches, and the green light was glowing consistently. The hairs on the back of my neck were still standing on end. Perhaps I hadn't locked a window. Perhaps it was simply the breeze. Perhaps a slight scratch on the tile. My throat tightened with each breath. The residence had a person inside. I slowly retreated while gripping my phone more tightly. I quickly went over my options: acquire a weapon to protect myself, phone the police, and find a bedroom where I could lock the door. However, a shadow appeared in the kitchen doorway before I could move. Who's there? With a trembling voice, I called. Quiet. With a trembling breath, I lifted my phone and placed my thumb over the emergency dial button. I'm going to call the police. I yelled. There was a slight click, followed by the sound of the rear door opening. The sound of footsteps echoed over the porch before disappearing into the darkness. When the dispatcher answered, I had to force myself to talk quietly because my hands were shaking when I dialed 911. My house was broken into, I said. They're gone now, but could you send someone, please? After 10 minutes, the living room's walls were painted with flashing red and blue lights. After searching the entire residence, the responding officers, 2 men in their 40s with clipped accents and exhausted eyes, found no evidence of forced entry. No jimmied locks, no damaged windows. There was no sound from the alarm system. While taking notes in his pad, one officer remarked, if they got in, they knew what they were doing. Or, the other said, perhaps they had a key. I went cold. A key. The realization was like a kick to the stomach. Vanessa. Before Daniel and I were married, she had resided in this home. Did she have an extra key? Or worse, Had she copied it before sending it back? Madam? I was startled out of my reverie by the officer's voice. I apologize. But I forced myself to concentrate and added, I think I know who it might have been. My sister-in-law. We've experienced problems lately. Is there any reason you think she could try to hurt you? I paused. Just Ethan's warning, Vanessa's rage at the burial, and now this I had no proof. However, I had a gut feeling that she was responsible. I'm not sure, I said. However, she has been attempting to seize control of my late husband's business. The situation has been tense. The officers looked at each other. One person remarked, well, since there is no proof of forced entry, there isn't much we can do tonight. However, we will submit a report. I would advise updating your security system, changing your locks, and perhaps adding cameras to the property in the interim. With my heart still racing in my ears, I nodded. The second officer said, try to get some rest. Call us immediately if anything else occurs. The house felt more oppressively quiet than before they left. I hurried through the house, checking each door and window twice before bolting the front door. My body was exhausted by the time. I fell into bed, but I was unable to fall asleep. My heart leaped into my throat with each creak of the old house. I could still hear Ethan's warning reverberating in my head somewhere in the dark. She is erratic. Be mindful of your back. I texted Ethan about the break-in, and he arrived the following morning. Did she use a key? He paced the living room and inquired. I'm not positive. But, I answered, it makes sense. She may still have a copy because she used to live here. Ethan muttered curses to himself. Today, you must change the locks. Additionally, if you want, I know a man who can install cameras both inside and out by tonight. I said without hesitation. Do it. Ethan gave a nod. I'll take care of it. Additionally, I'll let Vanessa know that. I'm aware of her. I paused. Perhaps we shouldn't approach her just yet. She may become more cautious or even dangerous if she knows. We have suspicions about her. Ethan rubbed the back of his neck and let out a deep exhale. All right. However, we cannot simply wait for her to try anything different, he stated. I said, I know, in a firmer tone. But for the time being, we concentrate on securing the premises and obtaining proof. If she goes beyond once more, we ensure that she cannot escape punishment. After examining me for a while, Ethan nodded. All right, he said. We'll be prepared. By that evening, the security system had been updated. Cameras had been installed at each entrance, and new locks had been installed. Even yet, I couldn't get rid of the sensation that it wouldn't be enough as I stood by the window and watched the rain slide down the glass. Because Vanessa no longer only wanted the business. She was pursuing me. Another instance did not occur for 2 weeks. A shaky sense of security was provided by the new locks, cameras, and security system, but I couldn't help but feel that Vanessa was waiting for the right opportunity to present itself once more. Ethan and I, meanwhile, put in endless hours to shield the business from her influence. However, no matter what we tried, Vanessa continued to discover methods to undermine our defenses, making it feel like we were using our bare hands to stop a flood. On a clear Friday morning, everything came to a head. Rachel, my assistant, showed up at the door with a pale face just as I had entered my office. Miss Hayes. Something is wrong. I felt sick to my stomach. What took place? Vanessa. She convened a board emergency meeting. It is currently taking place. My heart pounded as I gazed at her. Without my consent, Vanessa lacked the power to convene a board meeting. Unless she had secured the support of enough board members. As soon as Ethan saw me in the hallway, he fell into step with me. And I quickly grabbed my phone and headed for the conference room. His eyes were intense as he whispered. She wasted no time. A dozen board members were seated around the big mahogany table in the meeting room. Standing at the head with her hands resting lightly on a chair's back, Vanessa had a composed and assured look on her face. With a smile that stopped short of her eyes, she added, Well, look who finally decided to join us. I made myself be as composed as she was. This meeting was not permitted. It was, in fact, she said with ease. I can call a meeting in accordance with company bylaws because I have the support of 6 board members. I looked at the faces of the men and women I had known for years as I looked around the table. While some averted their eyes, others maintained eye contact with meticulously neutral looks. The betrayal was more painful than I had anticipated, but I forced the feeling out of my mind. Vanessa, what's this about? I asked fairly. She took a step forward. It concerns this company's future. Daniel had a clear vision. Creativity, honesty, and capable leadership were the cornerstones of Hayes Industries. However, beneath under temporary supervision, we have only observed instability. Investors are anxious. The profits are declining. Naturally, there's also the personal drama that has appeared in all of the city's business publications. Her grin grew angular. Let's be truthful, Sophia. This is not your calling. The room became quiet. It felt like you could choke on the heavy air, refusing to let her notice the impact of her words. I made myself breathe slowly. My family owns this business, I stated coolly. Daniel had faith in me to continue his legacy, and I've put forth a lot of effort to preserve what he created in spite of the difficulties. Vanessa's smile remained unwavering. But nonetheless, she paused, her eyes shining with victory. The board has serious doubts about your ability to lead us into the future. We are holding a vote of no confidence with immediate effect. My face was emptied of blood. I started to answer, but Ethan spoke first. Everyone in this room is aware that this is a power grab, he stated icily. From the beginning, Vanessa has been sabotaging Sophia. Don't allow personal grievances to control this company's future. Personal grievances? Anger surged in Vanessa's eyes. This is about what's best for Hayes Industries, not about me. And that calls for fresh leadership. I inhaled deeply to calm my pounding heart. I said in a forceful and clear voice, I'd like to say one more thing before anyone votes. Vanessa, who virtually exuded confidence, motioned for me to go on. I looked at each board member in turn and said, I know some of you have doubts. It was devastating for all of us to lose Daniel. However, I've thrown all of my work into protecting his legacy and making sure the business survives. Yes, we have had difficulties, but we have also advanced. We've landed important contracts, improved our rapport with investors, and established the framework for sustained expansion under my direction. I took a moment to process what I had said. But above all, I care about this firm because the employees deserve a leader who prioritizes their needs, not simply because. It's my family's heritage. Someone who cares about Hayes Industries' long-term prosperity rather than their own financial gain. I let my eyes focus on Vanessa. And I believe that everyone here is aware of which of us best fits that description. Quiet. Nobody moved for a second. Then, gradually, Richard Caldwell, a board member and Daniel's longtime friend, cleared his throat. Sophia is correct, he stated. Yes, we have seen setbacks, but she has consistently shown her commitment. She merits our assistance. Another board member gave a nod of approval. Then another. Vanessa paused her smile. The tide changed in a matter of minutes. The outcome of the vote was unambiguous. The board continued to support my leadership. The chair caused Vanessa's knuckles to become white. As the board started to disperse, I mutely remarked, looks like you'll have to wait a little longer for my resignation. Her gaze pierced my own. This is not the end of it. I understand, I answered. I knew I had won the fight when she bounded out of the room. However, the fight was far from over. The board meeting victory didn't last long. It became evident during the course of the following week that Vanessa had no plans to back down. The business was beset by minor acts of sabotage, such as delayed shipments, accidental disclosures of private information, and rumors of instability among our investors. Our hard-earned progress was eroded by each setback, and I knew Vanessa was responsible. However, establishing her involvement was a completely different story. Then she went over the finish line. It took place late one evening. My phone buzzed while I was still in the office, looking over financial data. Come to the server room, Ethan texted. Right now, with my heart pounding, I snatched up my keycard and ran down the hallway. The door to the server room was open, allowing light to flood the hallway. Ethan's face was stern as he squatted next to an open server rack inside. "What is it?" As I entered, I inquired. A flash drive that was packaged in a clear evidence bag was given to me. I discovered that this was connected to the primary server. Financial reports, client contracts, and even personnel records were being siphoned. My chest grew cold with fear. "Vanessa? Who else?" He stood with his hand raking through his hair. "She is attempting to destroy the business from the ground up, not just sabotaging us." My ears throbbed with my heartbeat. The consequences would be disastrous if this were to leak. We would lose government contracts, investor trust, everything. My jaw tightened as I gripped the flash drive tightly. Then we should quit playing defense. The strategy came together in a flash. Ethan used the information on the flash drive to link the breaches to a private server that was registered under a shell corporation, which we believed Vanessa was in charge of. Suspicion, however, was insufficient. We required indisputable evidence, and bringing her out was necessary for that. After 3 nights, I was by myself in my office, with my curtains drawn to block out the city lights. I had ensured that Vanessa was aware that the security system had been turned off for maintenance from a concealed console. In the server room, Ethan kept an eye on the cameras, prepared to capture every moment. We had no choice but to wait now. Hours stretched into minutes. It was midnight. Then 1. Ethan's voice immediately burst through my earpiece at 1:37 a.m., saying, "She's here, the east." Stairwell footsteps reverberated softly down the hallway, and I had to force myself to keep my breathing calm. The handle of the door twisted. Vanessa then entered. Her gaze shifted to the computer on my desk, then back to me. "Are you working late?" With a cheerful voice, as though we were old friends catching up, she asked. My arms were crossed over my chest. "Vanessa, what are you doing here?" With a small smile, she cocked her head. "I wanted to check in. We believed we could make the air clear, and in order to accomplish that, you had to break into my office?" Her grin grew angular. "Oh, Sophia. I'm still so innocent. Did you honestly believe you could outwit me?" Her eyes gleamed with something almost ferocious as she took a step closer. "I should have owned this business. When no one else would, I stood by Daniel and gave him everything. However, you swooped in like a vulture and took what was rightfully mine once. He passed away." I refused to flinch and stared her down. "Daniel believed in me because he understood your true nature." Her face contorted in rage. "None of this is fair to you, and I will do whatever it takes to reclaim what is rightfully mine." Despite my racing heart, I spoke calmly. "You won't have the opportunity. I have proof of all your actions. You're done, Vanessa." Her eyes expanded for a heartbeat. Then she made a lunge. She snatched the flash drive from my desk and spun towards the door before I could even respond. Ethan was quicker, though. He blocked her route by moving inside the doorway. "Are you going somewhere?" Vanessa stopped. Her eyes darted back and forth between us, strategic. Then she ran to the window. "Avoid her!" I yelled. The flash drive clattered to the floor as she got to the windowsill before Ethan seized her. Ethan kept Vanessa in place as she writhed and struggled like a savage animal until security officers barged in and took her from the room while yelling. The fallout came swiftly. We had everything we needed to file charges, including the security footage of Vanessa's break-in and the evidence from the flash drive. Her carefully built reputation was destroyed overnight when she was arrested for corporate espionage, fraud, and attempted sabotage. Despite the scandal's impact on the business community, Hayes Industries managed to survive. Having been reassured by our prompt action, investors rallied behind us. Finally, the board was solidly in my corner. But above all, at last I was free. Out of the shadow of Vanessa. I was free to run the business Daniel had given me. 1 week later, Ethan came up next to me with his hands in his pockets as I stood in my office looking out over the city skyline. "You succeeded," he said softly. I smiled and corrected. "We did it. Without you, I couldn't have completed this. For a moment, he maintained eye contact with me, a silent exchange taking place between us. Then he took a step back and nodded. He reminded me, his lips quirking in a slight smile. You have a meeting with the board in 10 minutes. Boss, don't keep them waiting. I laughed, at last feeling less burdened by months of doubt and worry. I stopped as I turned to face the entrance, giving Metropolis outside the glass one more glance. The conflict was over, and I had prevailed.